Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali, and today I'd like to talk about the recently celebrated 75th Independence Day. So, what do we understand by independence? And for most of us, we associate it with freedom and liberty. Now, when we talk about independence, we also talk about the struggles we had to face in order to achieve our independence, the sacrifices that people had to make in order to find their independence, to find their free country, independent country, to get a choice to create and to make a new constitution, to get a choice to be self-governed, to get a choice to choose their own governance, our own governance. So let's understand independence from a few of these aspects. We mentioned that to gain our own independence, to be a free nation, we had to struggle for it. We had to fight for our own independence. And I'm assuming that we essentially being a country that practices and preaches ahimsa and patience, fighting or waging a war to have our own independence was not an easy choice, was not an easy decision to make. And that is why, because of this particular belief, because of this particular philosophy, it took us a little longer. Now, I'm not judging it, but maybe it at times is essential to question our own beliefs, which may at times hold us back or even propel us forward, which may also test our limits, test our boundaries to how much can we endure and tolerate. And maybe at times we also have to disrupt our own beliefs to be able to achieve our own freedom. Now, freedom fighters, our great leaders, the martyrs of our freedom struggle, had also said that there is a price for freedom. And Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose had said, "Tum mujhe khoon do, main tumhe azadi dunga." The price for freedom is blood, and blood is life. Now, as much as life is fundamentally meant to be free, the existence of life is fundamentally meant to be free, it doesn't come without responsibility, without accountability. As much as freedom is the fundamental right, it's also a choice. It's a very powerful choice. It's an empowering choice. And here I'm quoting a dialogue from Spider-Man. With greater power comes greater responsibility. And if freedom is empowering, it cannot come without responsibility, without accountability, which means a lot of self-accountability. Even if it means that we take accountability for 1% of our contribution towards all of the decisions and all of the choices that we have made within our intrapersonal, within our personal and our interpersonal associations. Even if we are not completely responsible for all of the choices and all of the decisions that we have made in our lives or that have been made to us, there is a chance that we have made 1% of those decisions. We have contributed 1% towards those choices, towards those decisions. And we need to be able to take accountability for all of those things, for all of those choices. And when we have the freedom, or even enough freedom, we do get the free package of consequences of those freedoms and the free choices as well. It's a package deal that none of us can escape, though most of the times we would like to have an escape from that. That's just being human. If freedom is about choices, it's also about facing all of the anxieties and all of the fears that comes with the choices that we make for ourselves. And that is where I'd also like to cite the example of this North Korean defector, Yeonmi Park, though there have been many, but I'm quoting Yeonmi Park, When she first found freedom, she also found it scary. When she escaped North Korea to find freedom for herself and her family, finding freedom was a scary prospect for her, because now it entailed that all of the life decisions that she would be making, the consequences of those life decisions will be partly her co-creation. She would be partly responsible and accountable for all of the life choices that she makes for herself and for the people that she connects with, she interacts with. That now she could not blame somebody else completely for her misfortunes. And when I looked for the root word for independence and for freedom, I got to understand that dependence actually meant to hang from something, to cling on to something. Originally, it meant that. While on the other hand, independence meant not to hang from something, not to cling on to something. And through the other lens, if we dissect the word independence, it would actually mean independence. Independence to the self, which calls for self-trust, which calls for self-responsibility, which calls for self-dependence, which calls for self-reliance. Not in a clingy way, not in a way where we are taking it for granted, but more in an accountable, in a responsible, in a very respectable way. If we could look at independence as independence, we'd probably also understand that it's talking about inner dependence, dependence on the self, self-reliance, self-trust, responsibility, self-accountability. And since we are social creatures, we cannot exactly separate the self from our interpersonal connections, from our interpersonal interactions. The self cannot exist without those things, since we are social creatures as well on some level, which also means that independence is also about our ability to have the freedom to make choices with regards to our interpersonal relationships, the dynamics of those interpersonal relationships, the interplay, the interaction between those interpersonal social relationships. And not just social, but also our intimate interpersonal relationships. How much can we rely on those interpersonal relationships? How free are we to really connect on those interpersonal relationships? How intimate can we be in those interpersonal relationships? And when I'm talking of intimate, I'm talking about into me, you see. It's about how vulnerable are we willing to be within those relationships. And when I looked for the root word for freedom, it came from the word friend, which invariably also tells us about the choices we have made with regards to friending and befriending certain parts of ourselves and others who associate with us. And if freedom on some levels is associated with friendship, we'd also understand the kind of emotions we feel when we are interacting, when we are engaging with those friends. Independence and liberty from a narrow perspective, which at times can be helpful. It may make us lose the bigger perspective. The idea is to be able to look at independence through all of these lenses so that we understand the bigger dynamics of the word independence and its interplay as well, so that it empowers and enables us rather than cripple us to make the choices that we want for our lives, and then to be able to constantly reassess those choices as well. The ability to respond towards those choices and to hold our part in the choices that we make, I believe, is true freedom. I understand is independence. Let's try and think about independence from a bigger perspective. Let's try and understand the nuances of independence and freedom and liberty and choices, and the choices that comes with its consequences. Our responsibility and our accountability towards those free choices, even if it means 1% of our choice making in that. Let's try and think about all of those things, and I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the contents of my videos, please do like, share, and subscribe.